Many people look at Wild West brothel workers through romantic eyes. They think about glamorous saloon girls in fancy dresses, their feather boas swishing as they charm cowboys with witty banter. Nothing could be further from the truth. For most women in the sporting life, as it was called, existence was a brutal fight for survival in a world where they were simultaneously in high demand and deeply despised. What Hollywood won't show you is the reality. A soiled dove's morning breath in a room where 6 women slept on 3 beds, the constant fear of disease, and the knowledge that they were just one angry client away from joining the endless parade of unmarked graves. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep? All right, 1870s Wild West tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really. Check, pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. Your eyes crack open to the sound of coughing. Not yours. Everyone's. The air in this cramped second-floor room is stale, thick with the scent of cheap perfume trying desperately to mask what lies beneath. You're on a lumpy mattress, one of 3 crammed into a room barely large enough for one. There's a reason they call places like these cribs. They're about as spacious as a baby's bed, but with none of the innocence. Your back aches from the sagging mattress. Unlike your soft pillow at home, your head rests on a bundle of cloth that might generously be called a pillow. The sheets? Let's not talk about the sheets. You're pretty sure they haven't been washed in the past week, despite the activities they've witnessed. Or rise and shine, ladies. The voice belongs to Madam Rosie, the owner of this establishment in Virginia City, Nevada. She's not the cruel type of madam you might expect, more of a businesswoman with an uncomfortable amount of practical experience in survival. Miners coming off night shift in an hour? Best be ready. The gold rush days created boom towns overnight, and wherever men gathered to seek their fortune, women arrived to profit from their loneliness. The math was simple and brutal. In places like Virginia City, men outnumbered women 8 to 1. In California in 1850, nearly 90% of the population was male. Now that's what you call a seller's market. Jesus, my head, groans Lily from the next bed. She's been in the business for 3 years, ancient by soiled dove standards. Most women lasted only a year or 2 before disease, violence, or despair claimed them. Someone passed the laudanum. And there it is, your first glimpse into how these women coped. The sweet brown liquid in little glass bottles was technically medicine, but it was mostly opium dissolved in alcohol. Think of it as the 1870s version of self-medication. For a lot of women, it started as pain relief and ended as addiction. You're sharing your bed with Sarah, a 19-year-old from Boston. She doesn't talk about how she got here. Nobody does. But you know the common paths. Seduced and abandoned, widowed with no skills, escaping abusive families, or simply desperate for money in a world that offered women few legitimate opportunities. My turn at the basin, Sarah mumbles, dragging herself up. The washing situation is, well, it's not your modern bathroom, that's for sure. In the corner sits a porcelain basin with maybe 2 inches of water that all 6 women in this room will use to wash themselves. By the time the last girl gets there, that water is going to be a grimy grey soup. But hey, at least they're trying, which is more than most people did in the 1870s Wild West. Think about this. In a time when most people considered bathing a monthly activity at best, brothel workers actually maintained higher hygiene standards than average. They had to. Their business depended on it. Still, with limited water and knowledge about germs, clean was a relative term. "Pass the tooth powder," calls Mary from across the room. Toothpaste wouldn't be invented until 1873, and even then it was a luxury. Instead, baking soda, salt, or even campfire ash served as tooth cleaners. Mary dips her finger in the shared pot of white powder and vigorously rubs it across her teeth. The sounds from outside start filtering in through the thin walls, men shouting, horses neighing, the general commotion of a mining town waking up. Virginia City isn't like the established cities back east. It's a place built on silver, where fortunes are made and lost overnight, and everything, including people, is considered disposable. "Heard Billy the Kid's gang might be coming through," Jenny says as she pins up her hair. She's the youngest, barely 16. Last time they were here, they spent a month's worth of wages in one night and shot up Mabel's place, Sarah reminds her. "Remember what happened to Lucy?" The room goes quiet. You don't need to ask who Lucy was or what happened to her. Violence was an occupational hazard. The West wasn't lawless exactly, but law enforcement had priorities, and protecting soiled doves wasn't high on the list. Madame Rosie appears in the doorway again, her massive frame blocking most of the light. "Enough chatter. Time to get dressed. Sarah, you take the blue dress today. Jenny, the red suits your hair." These aren't the elaborate gowns you see in Western films. Most brothel workers wore simple dresses, sometimes just everyday wear with a lower neckline. The fancy feathers and satins, those were for the high-class parlour houses in big cities, not for a place like this, where miners came straight from the diggings with silver dust still in their beards. "Hey, look what I got," Mary grins, pulling out a small tin of rouge. "Ordered it special from San Francisco." This was luxury in a world without Sephora. Cosmetics were often homemade, sometimes with dangerous ingredients like lead and mercury. That rosy glow might come at the cost of slow poisoning, but in a profession where your looks determined your income, women took the risk. "Remember, girls," Madame Rosie calls over her shoulder as she heads down to open up. "Check 'em for sores before you take 'em upstairs. And they pay first. Always." This wasn't just about money, it was survival. Venereal diseases like syphilis, called the calamity for good reason, and gonorrhea were rampant, with no effective treatments, and clients who didn't pay could turn violent fast. You rise and join the morning rush for the basin. Your stomach growls, reminding you that breakfast will be whatever's left in the kitchen. Probably some hardtack and coffee if you're lucky, but you're actually better fed than most women in this profession. Madame Rosie runs a decent house. Sarah catches your eye as she struggles with her corset strings. "Help me." As you pull the laces tight, you can feel her ribs beneath your fingers. This isn't the fashionable wasp waist corset of Eastern society ladies. It's a practical garment designed to enhance what needs enhancing for business purposes. "Not too tight," she whispers. "Had a girl pass out once. Customer thought she died. Whole place went to hell." Outside, the bell from the assay office rings 8 times. The day shift will be ending soon, and the night shift workers will be coming off duty, pockets full of wages and looking for ways to spend them. "Remember when we thought we'd marry bankers?" Jenny laughs, but there's no humour in it. That's the thing about these women. In your head, you're screaming, "This is how I die, in a crib with 5 other women hoping not to catch something that'll rot my brain." But out loud, they joke, they laugh, they create a veneer of normalcy over a life that's anything but. "I'm saving up," Sarah says, a daily mantra that's part prayer, part delusion. 2 more months, and I'll have enough to open a dress shop. Few ever escaped. The money was better than most jobs available to women. A factory girl might make $3 a week, while a prostitute could make that in a night. But expenses were high. Room and board required fancy clothes, mandatory gifts to law enforcement to avoid arrest, and the ever-present doctor fees for treating the occupational diseases ate away at those earnings. By now, everyone's dressed, faces powdered to hide the pallor that comes from sleeping during daylight and working at night. The room that looked so grim in the morning light has transformed, not into something beautiful, but into something functional, a workplace. Last one down gets the first customer off night shift, Madame Rosie calls up the stairs. And trust me, you don't want Big Pete before he's had a bath. There's a scramble for the door, a flurry of skirts and perfume. You join them, stepping carefully downstairs, worn smooth by thousands of similar journeys. The day is beginning, though for you, it's more like evening, the start of a long night of work. The saloon below is being swept out, the stale beer smell briefly overwhelmed by dust. A piano sits in the corner, waiting for the player who'll arrive around noon. The bartender, an ex-boxer named Jim with cauliflower ears and missing teeth, nods as you all file in. "Got a fresh barrel tapped," he says, "and the whiskey shipment came in." Alcohol was the lubricant that kept these establishments running, not just for the customers, but for the women too. It dulled senses, clouded judgment, and made the unendurable seem manageable. For many, it was the gateway to laudanum addiction. The first customers are already waiting outside. You can see their shadows through the frosted windows, men with dirt under their nails and silver dust in their pockets, men who spent weeks or months without seeing a woman, working in conditions so dangerous that many wouldn't live to see 30. "Fix your face," Madame Rosie tells you. "Nobody pays for sad." And there it is, the unspoken contract of this life. It's not just your body that's for sale, but the illusion of desire, of happiness, of connection. The emotional labor was often harder than the physical. The doors swing open, sunlight slashes across the floor like a knife, and the day, your night, begins. "Well, hello there, strangers," calls Jenny in a practiced voice that sounds nothing like the girl who was yawning upstairs 5 minutes ago. "Looking for some company?" Outside on the main street of Virginia City, respectable women pull their skirts aside as they pass the brothel, careful not to let the fabric touch the building, as if sin itself might be contagious. Their husbands tip their hats politely to Madame Rosie when they pass her on the street during daylight hours, pretending they don't recognize her from their visits under cover of darkness. The hypocrisy wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the working girls. Brothels were officially illegal in most places, but openly tolerated. Cities collected licensing fees and fines that amounted to business taxes. In Virginia City, these women provided nearly 25% of the municipal revenue. The first client heads upstairs with Mary. You know the routine that will follow, the haggling over price, the insistence on seeing payment first, the quick check for visible signs of disease, the even quicker transaction. The average visit lasted less than 15 minutes. "Don't forget to wash after," Madame Rosie reminds her, loud enough for the client to hear. It's part warning, part advertisement of the house's standards. Unlike your clean bathroom at home with running water and soap, washing after here means a quick swipe with a rag dipped in a solution of carbolic acid if you're lucky. If not, just water that gets increasingly questionable as the day progresses. The day unfolds in a blur of faces and demands. By noon, the room is full, piano playing, drinks flowing. You move mechanically through the rituals of flirtation, the practiced laughs at jokes you've heard 100 times before. A miner shows you a nugget he found, eyes bright with the fever that drives men to spend years hunting treasure. "This'll be worth something someday," he tells you, as if you haven't heard that line before. "Sure will, honey," you reply, because that's what he's paying to hear. And through it all, you watch, you observe the patterns, learn who's dangerous when drunk, memorize the fastest routes to the door. Survival here isn't just about avoiding disease, it's about reading men's moods, anticipating violence before it erupts. Because make no mistake, violence was common. The stories don't make it into the romanticized versions, but they were part of daily life, like Jenny Bright, a madam who shot a man through the heart when he tried to hit her after being denied entry due to having a venereal disease. Or Molly Scott, whose husband shot her to death one night and fled, leaving other prostitutes to dress her body for burial. As the afternoon stretches on, you find a moment of quiet and catch Sarah's eye across the room. She gives you a tired smile that speaks volumes. In that moment, there's a flash of genuine human connection in a place designed to manufacture its counterfeit. And that's the contradiction at the heart of this world. These women, dismissed by society as fallen and immoral, created their own communities, their own support systems, their own economies. They looked after each other because no one else would. The afternoon light slants golden through the windows. Evening is coming, which means the real work is about to begin. The night shift miners will be arriving soon, fresh from the deep, dark tunnels beneath Virginia City, carrying the Earth's treasures and their own desperation. Madame Rosie moves through the room, straightening a picture frame, adjusting a lamp. Despite everything, she runs a tight ship. Her girls get regular meals, protection from the worst clients, and a doctor when they need one. In the hierarchy of the profession, this puts them several rungs above the crib girls, who work independently in shacks on the edge of town, or the desperate women servicing men in tents at remote mining camps. "Get something to eat before the rush," she tells you, not unkindly. "Gonna be a long night." You head to the kitchen, where a pot of stew simmers on the stove. Better fare than many in town will eat tonight. The West wasn't just wild, it was hungry. Food supplies were unreliable, and scurvy was common even among those who struck it rich. As you eat, you listen to the sounds of the house. The piano music, laughter both genuine and manufactured, the creak of stairs as business continues. This is your world now, for better or worse. A world where women turned the only asset society recognized in them into a means of survival and occasionally power. Night falls over Virginia City. Oil lamps are lit, casting warm light and long shadows. The real business of the night is just beginning as you finish your meal and straighten your dress. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a tarnished mirror and barely recognize the woman looking back. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. The basin of grey water, the tooth powder, the rouge, the practiced smiles. But for now, there's just this moment, this breath before plunging back into the current. You touch the small knife hidden in your garter, a precaution Madame Rosie insists upon, and head back into the saloon. The doors swing open, bringing a blast of cool evening air and the first wave of night shift workers, their faces blackened with silver dust, eyes squinting in the relative brightness after hours underground. "Evening, gentlemen," calls Madame Rosie. "Welcome to the Silver Queen. What's your pleasure tonight?" The night at the Silver Queen had stretched into the early morning hours. Now, with the first hint of dawn creeping through the grimy windows, the last drunken miner has finally been shown the door. The women drag themselves upstairs, bones aching, faces stiff from forced smiles that never reach their eyes. 5 hours till we open again, Sarah mutters, collapsing onto the shared bed. Might as well be 5 minutes. Sleep in a brothel wasn't the peaceful affair you're experiencing right now in your comfortable bed. It came in snatches, often interrupted, always insufficient. The women developed a sixth sense, sleeping with one eye open, waking at unfamiliar sounds. A survival skill in a world where danger could come from clients, lawmen, or rival establishments. Morning comes too quickly and the daily routine begins again. But today we'll see beyond the awakening into the full rhythm of a soiled dove's day. "Water deliveries here," calls Madame Rosie from downstairs. The words send a ripple of energy through the exhausted women. In mining towns like Virginia City, fresh water was precious as the silver they dug from the earth. Most buildings had no running water. Instead, water carriers made daily rounds, selling their goods by the bucket. For a brothel, water was a business expense, and a considerable one. "My turn to haul," sighs Lily, forcing herself up. "Someone help me with the buckets." You join her at the top of the stairs, watching as a wiry man lugs wooden buckets into the kitchen below. The water glistens in the morning light, a mundane miracle most people today take for granted. "That's 12 gallons, ma'am," the water carrier tells Madame Rosie. "Usual rate. 12 gallons for 6 working girls, plus whatever the house needs for cooking and cleaning. Do the math. That's barely 2 gallons per woman. Your modern shower uses that much in less than a minute." "Bring extra tomorrow," Madame Rosie says, counting coins into his palm. "Got miners coming in from the new strike at Gold Hill. They'll be filthy." You and Lily descend the stairs to retrieve the water, carrying it up bucket by bucket. The weight makes your arms tremble. Water sloshing over the sides, but you're careful not to spill much. Every drop counts. "Fill the hip bath first," Madame Rosie directs. "Jenny's got that cattle baron at noon. Man pays extra for clean girls." The hip bath, a metal tub barely big enough for an adult to crouch in, sits in a corner of the largest bedroom. It's a luxury item in the 1870s West, reserved for the highest-paying customers or the most profitable girls. "Same water for everyone after?" Sarah asks, already knowing the answer. "Same as always," Madame Rosie confirms. "Jenny first, then whoever's got special clients, then the rest of you by seniority." That's right, the same bath water used by woman after woman until it was too filthy to serve its purpose. Even then, it might be used to mop floors or wash linens before being discarded. "Water heating on the stove," Madame Rosie adds, "should be ready in an hour." While waiting for their turns at washing, the women attend to other morning duties. Brothels, contrary to what you might think, were often cleaner than surrounding establishments. Disease was bad for business, and madams enforced hygiene standards as best they could with the knowledge available. "Got something for you girls?" says Jim the bartender, appearing at the top of the stairs with a crate. "Drummer came through yesterday selling these." Inside the crate are bottles of dark liquid labelled Dr. Kilmer's Female Remedy, snake oil most likely, a mixture of alcohol, opium and herbs that promised everything from curing female complaints to preventing pregnancy. Medicine in the Wild West was a dangerous mix of folk remedies, patent nostrums and outright fraud. "How much?" Madame Rosie asks, ever the businesswoman. "Already paid," Jim says with a shrug. "Consider it insurance. Don't need any of you girls laying up sick." The unspoken reality hangs in the air. A brothel without working girls doesn't make money. Jim's gesture isn't pure kindness, it's practical economics. Mary grabs a bottle, uncorks it with her teeth and takes a swig. "Tastes like horse piss and licorice," she pronounces. "Probably works about as well, too." The women laugh, but they all take bottles anyway. In a world without effective medicine, even false hope was better than none. Breakfast in 10, calls Madame Rosie. Then everyone helps with the cleaning. The kitchen is the heart of this unusual household. Unlike your spotless modern kitchen, this one is dominated by a massive iron stove that requires constant feeding with wood. The table is scarred from years of use, the dishes mismatched but relatively clean. Breakfast is simple: cornmeal mush, salt pork, and strong coffee black as sin. The women eat quickly without the modern luxury of lingering over meals. Time is money in a business that sells it by the hour. God, I miss proper eggs, sighs Jenny, pushing the mush around her plate. My ma used to make the best scrambled eggs with cream. My ma used to beat me with a broom handle, Mary counters flatly, so I'll take the mush. And there's the truth that rarely makes it into the romantic stories. Many women entered this life fleeing something worse: abusive homes, grinding poverty, or the desperate situation of being widowed or abandoned in a society where women had few rights and fewer opportunities. After breakfast comes the real work of maintaining the establishment. Each woman has assigned tasks: washing glasses, sweeping floors, changing linens. The sheets from last night are stripped and taken to large tubs in the backyard where they'll be boiled with lye soap. A brutal process that chaps hands and stings eyes but kills both stains and some germs. Got a tear in the blue dress, Sarah says, holding up the garment to the light. Need to mend it before tonight. Clothing repair was constant. The dresses worn by brothel workers weren't the elaborate costumes of movie fantasy, but practical garments designed to be easily removed and sturdy enough to withstand rough handling. Still, they wore out quickly and replacements were expensive. Use the silk thread for that one, Madame Rosie advises, and mind the neckline. It's drooping too low on the left. By mid-morning, the water for the hip bath is finally hot. Jenny strips down without self-consciousness. Privacy is a luxury unknown in this setting, and climbs into the steaming water. Sweet Jesus, she sighs, sinking down. Almost worth being a whore just for a hot bath. The others laugh at the gallows humour. They've all made similar jokes. What else can you do when faced with the reality of your situation? As Jenny bathes, Sarah sits nearby, stitching the torn dress while Mary sorts through a box of cosmetics, discarding dried-out rouge pots and empty perfume bottles. Heard there's a new doctor in town, Lily mentions casually, but everyone's attention sharpens. Girl at the bucket of blood says he doesn't report to the sheriff. This news ripples through the room like electricity. In most towns, doctors were required to report treated prostitutes to law enforcement, which could mean fines, jail time, or forced relocation. A discreet doctor was worth his weight in silver. What's he charge? Asks Madame Rosie, ever practical. Same as old Doc Turner, but without the sermon, Lily replies. Find out where, Madame Rosie says. Might be worth switching. Medical care was a constant concern. Venereal diseases were rampant, with treatments often worse than the conditions they aimed to cure. Mercury was commonly used to treat syphilis, causing drooling, tooth loss, and neurological damage. Abortions were dangerous and illegal but common necessity. By now, Jenny has finished her bath, the water noticeably greyer than when she started. Sarah is next, then Mary, each woman making do with increasingly dirty water. Got something on my monthly, Lily announces, pulling a small cloth packet from beneath her mattress. Anyone need some? The packet contains dried tansy and pennyroyal, herbs believed to prevent pregnancy when brewed as a tea. They were somewhat effective, but dangerously toxic in large doses. Still, they were preferable to the alternatives: unwanted pregnancy or dangerous abortion attempts. Several women take pinches of the herbs, tucking them away for later use. Birth control was a critical survival strategy, not a convenience. A pregnant prostitute couldn't work, and few had resources to support a child. Males here, calls Jim from below, got letters? Letters were lifelines to the outside world, treasured connections to families who sometimes didn't know their daughters' true occupations. Many prostitutes told parents they were working as seamstresses or housekeepers, sending home money while hiding the source. "Anything for me?" asks Jenny, hope making her voice young again. Jim checks the small stack. "Nothing today, kid." Her face falls momentarily before the professional mask slips back into place. "Their loss," she says with forced brightness. By noon, the preparations are complete. The saloon below has been swept and stocked, the spittoons emptied and rinsed, a particularly foul job that rotated among the women, and fresh sawdust scattered on the floor to absorb spills and worse. The women gather in Madame Rosie's room for a daily ritual unknown to outsiders. She hands each a small glass of brandy, not the watered-down stuff served to customers, but good-quality liquor kept for this purpose. "To making it through another day," she says, raising her glass. The women drink silently, this small ceremony marking the transition from their private morning to their public afternoon and evening. "Now for the war paint," Mary says, pulling out her cosmetics kit. The transformation is methodical. First, rice powder to create a pale complexion, fashionable at the time and useful for hiding signs of illness or exhaustion. Next, rouge for cheeks and lips, applied with a delicate touch. Too much marked a woman as cheap. Finally, charcoal to darken eyelashes and brows. "Here," Sarah says, handing you a small bottle. "It's my last bit of proper French perfume. Just a dab, mind you." The scent is floral and heavy by modern standards, designed to mask body odours in an era when daily bathing was uncommon. You apply it to wrists and behind ears, the ritual oddly similar to what women still do today, though for different reasons. "Remember," Madame Rosie says, as you all prepare to descend, "check their hands first. Miners with fresh pay have clean fingernails. The ones with dirty hands already spent their money elsewhere." This practical advice, the kind never included in romantic tales of the Wild West, was how women survived. They learned to assess clients quickly, identifying potential dangers and profitable opportunities with equal speed. "And for God's sake," she adds, "hide your valuables better than last time. That drifter nearly made off with Mary's locket." Each woman had hiding places for the small treasures that represented escape, saved money, jewellery that could be sold in an emergency, perhaps a train ticket kept ready for the day they'd leave this life behind. Most never used them, but the possibility provided comfort. The afternoon sun slants through the window in an emergency, perhaps a train ticket kept ready for the day they'd leave this life behind. Most never used them, but the possibility provided comfort. The afternoon sun slants through the windows as you all make your way downstairs. Jim has already opened the doors, and a few early customers, men who work night shifts or have the day off, are seated at tables. "Smile," Madame Rosie reminds you all quietly, "no matter what." The women fan out through the room, transforming as they move from the relative sisterhood of the morning to the performers of male fantasy they must be to survive. Backs straighten, hips sway, voices rise to a practiced pitch that carries over the piano that's now being played by a bleary-eyed man in the corner. You watch Sarah approach a well-dressed man near the window, clearly not a miner, but perhaps a store owner or bank clerk. She laughs at something he says, touching his arm lightly, all while maintaining precisely the right distance, close enough to suggest intimacy, far enough to avoid presumption. "Whiskey, darling?" asks a voice at your elbow. You turn to find a middle-aged man with a sun-weathered face and relatively clean clothes. A rancher, most likely. "All love some," you reply with the practiced smile that's become second nature. This is how it begins, day after day. The careful dance of suggestion and negotiation, the assessment of risk and reward. The working women of the Wild West were businesswomen operating in the only industry widely available to them, with all the practical concerns of any entrepreneur: overhead costs, client relations, competition, and long-term planning. The afternoon unfolds in a rhythm familiar to everyone in the house. Men come and go, drinks flow, money changes hands. Upstairs, floorboards creak with footsteps and the weight of transactions, both financial and physical. By late afternoon, the house is in full swing. The piano player has found his stride, pounding out popular tunes with mechanical efficiency. The air is thick with tobacco smoke, perfume, and the smell of unwashed bodies, an assault on the senses that you've somehow grown accustomed to. From your seat near the bar, you watch the room with the situational awareness that becomes instinct in this line of work. You note the miner getting too drunk in the corner, the nervous young man clearly on his first visit to such an establishment, the regular who treats the women with surprising courtesy. "Watch the one with the red beard," Jim murmurs as he wipes a glass behind the bar. "He was thrown out of the Golden Slipper last week, got rough with one of their girls." This information passes quickly among the women, a whispered word here, a meaningful glance there. By unspoken agreement, nobody approaches Redbeard directly, but he's never left alone. When he calls for company, Madame Rosie herself sits with him, her bulk and well-known derringer keeping him in check. This is how women survived, through information networks, mutual protection, and the careful management of risks that couldn't be eliminated entirely. As evening approaches, bringing with it the promise of the busiest hours ahead, you catch Sarah's eye across the room. She gives you a quick, genuine smile, a flash of the real person behind the professional facade before turning back to her customer. In that moment, there's a strange realization. Despite everything, the dangers, the social stigma, the physical toll, there is a kind of freedom here too. These women, operating at the margins of society, created their own community with its own rules and support systems. Many experienced a level of financial independence unknown to their respectable counterparts, making decisions about their lives that married women legally couldn't. The cattle baron has arrived for his appointment with Jenny. He's a large man with an oversized silver belt buckle and boots that probably cost more than most miners made in a month. Jenny greets him with practiced enthusiasm, but you notice how she positions herself near the stairs, keeping the exit in view. Another survival strategy. "She'll be fine," says Madame Rosie, noticing your concern. "He's rough around the edges but pays well and doesn't cause trouble. Besides," she pats the pocket where her derringer resides, "he knows better than to try anything in my house." The light outside fades to dusk. Oil lamps are lit, casting a warm glow that softens the room's harsh realities. The night shift will be arriving soon, bringing with it a fresh wave of customers and challenges. You straighten your dress, touch up your rouge, and prepare for the hours ahead. This is life in a Wild West brothel, not the romanticized fantasy of fiction, but a complex reality of practical concerns, daily routines, and strategies for survival in a world that offered women few options and less mercy. As the first stars appear in the darkening sky outside, you raise a glass with the other women in a silent toast to making it through another day in a place where tomorrow is never guaranteed. The night at the Silver Queen had stretched long, the hours blurring together in a haze of smoke, whiskey, and forced laughter. By the time the last customer stumbled out, dawn was already threatening the eastern sky. Now, in the relative quiet of mid-morning, a different side of brothel life emerges, the complex social web that bound these women together and connected them, sometimes surprisingly, to the broader community. "Mail's here," Jim calls, setting a small stack of envelopes on the bar, and the supply wagons coming up the street. The arrival of mail and supplies was a major event in isolated mining towns where connections to the outside world were tenuous at best. For the women of the Silver Queen, these deliveries represented both practical necessities and emotional lifelines. Sarah sifts through the envelopes with careful fingers. "Got one," she says, her voice carefully neutral despite the excitement in her eyes. She tucks the letter into her pocket without opening it. Private moments were rare enough to be savoured in solitude. "Supply list," Madame Rosie announces, unfolding a piece of paper. "Mary, you're coming with me. Rest of you, finish the washing and mending." The relationship between madam and workers wasn't exactly maternal, but it wasn't purely business either. Madam Rosie protected her girls, not just as investments, but as people under her care, a complex dynamic that created a strange sort of family structure. "Can I come too?" Jenny asks, her youth showing through. "I need new hair ribbons." Madam Rosie sighs, but nods. "Fine, but stay close. Don't need any trouble from the town ladies." The social hierarchy of a mining town was rigid, with respectable women at the top and soiled doves at the bottom, yet the reality was far more complicated than this simple division suggested. "Speaking of the town ladies," Jim says, wiping down the bar, "Mrs. Holcomb was asking if we'd donate to the new school fund again." "That woman," Madame Rosie snorts, "happy to take our money but won't look me in the eye on the street." This was the paradox of brothel life in the Wild West. The same establishments scorned by polite society were often major contributors to civic projects. In many towns, prostitutes and madams funded schools, churches and hospitals, institutions that would later refuse to serve them. "Tell her we'll match whatever the bank donates," Madame Rosie decides after a moment. "Anonymously, of course." "Course," Jim agrees, though everyone knows the source of the donation will be an open secret in a town this size. After Madame Rosie departs with Mary and Jenny, the brothel settles into a different rhythm. Without customers or the Madame present, the remaining women relax into more authentic versions of themselves. "Got some coffee left?" Lily asks, stretching her back. "Real coffee, not that mud we serve the customers." You pour her a cup from the private stash kept in the kitchen, another of the small luxuries that marked the difference between public and private life in the brothel. "Thanks, hun." She takes a sip and sighs with satisfaction. "Damn, my feet are killing me. That rancher last night had me dancing for 2 hours straight before he even mentioned going upstairs." These quiet moments between women were where real relationships formed. Despite popular imagination, competition between prostitutes was often secondary to cooperation. They watched each other's backs, shared resources, and provided the emotional support lacking from the rest of society. "Sarah, that letter from your sister?" asks Lily, nodding toward the envelope peeking from Sarah's pocket. Sarah nods, a small smile playing at her lips. She had her baby, a girl. "That's wonderful," you say, meaning it. "What did they name her?" "Elizabeth, after our mother." Sarah's voice catches slightly, says she's healthy and strong. What goes unspoken is the reality that Sarah will likely never meet her niece. Many women in the sporting life maintain connections with family through letters but rarely visited. The shame associated with their profession made reunions difficult, if not impossible. My sister hasn't written in 3 years, Lily says matter-of-factly. Not since I told her what I really do for living. The room goes quiet. Every woman there knows some version of this story. The severed ties, the lies maintained to preserve relationships, the painful honesty that sometimes destroyed them. A knock at the back door breaks the moment. You open it to find a young boy, maybe 12, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "Doc Simmons sent me," he says, not meeting your eyes. "Says to tell you he'll be by after dark. Someone sick needs seeing to." You press a coin into his hand. "Tell him we'll be expecting him." The boy nods and dashes away, clearly uncomfortable with his errand. But the message is significant. It represents another facet of the complex social network surrounding the brothel. "Must be for Lucy at the Gem," Lily speculates once you've closed the door. "Heard she was coughing blood yesterday. Poor thing." Sarah shakes her head. "Consumption, probably." Tuberculosis, consumption in the parlance of the time, was a common killer in the close quarters of mining towns. For prostitutes who literally couldn't afford to take time off when sick, it was often a death sentence. What's notable about this exchange is the relationship with Doc Simmons. While some doctors refused to treat fallen women at all, others provided care discreetly, often after normal business hours. These physicians weren't necessarily more moral than their peers. They simply recognized the practical reality that disease didn't respect social boundaries. "Remember that doctor in Denver?" Lily asks. "The one who'd only treat us if we sat in the barn behind his office?" "Better than the one in Leadville who reported every girl to the sheriff," Sarah counters. "Got half the cribs shut down in a week." The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the butcher's boy with the day's meat delivery, another social connection that bridged the divide between the brothel and the larger community. "Afternoon, ladies," he says with a cheeky grin, clearly enjoying his regular visits to the otherwise forbidden establishment. "Got the best cuts for you, like always." This teenager, too young to be a customer but old enough to make deliveries, represents yet another strand in the social fabric. The brothel might be officially taboo, but it was also an integral part of the economic ecosystem. "Your mother know you're flirting with whores, Tommy?" Lily teases, taking the wrapped meat. "My mother knows you all tip better than the hotel," he replies without missing a beat. "And don't complain about the price." After he leaves, you all share a laugh. "That boy's going to be trouble when he's older," Sarah predicts. "Already is," says Lily. "Saw him sneaking out of the Magnolia house past midnight last week. His mother would skin him alive." The Magnolia was a competing establishment down the street, lower class than the Silver Queen, catering to miners rather than the businessmen and ranchers who frequented Madame Rosie's. As if summoned by the mention, a woman appears at the front door. Pearl, one of the Magnolia girls, looking worried. "Is Rosie here?" she asks, glancing over her shoulder. "Need to talk to her." "Supply run," you explain. "Something wrong?" Pearl hesitates, clearly debating whether to share with you what she came to tell the madam. Finally, necessity overcomes caution. "New marshal's in town," she says in a low voice. "Word is he's planning a raid tonight, looking to make an impression." This news sends a ripple of tension through the room. While prostitution was technically illegal, most law enforcement operated on a system of regular payoffs and deliberate blindness. A new marshal could disrupt this delicate balance, especially if he was looking to prove himself. "You warning all the houses?" Sarah asks, already moving to gather valuables that might be confiscated in a raid. Pearl nods. "Mags sent me to spread the word. Figured we're all in the same boat." This cooperation between competing brothels highlights another aspect of their social structure. While they might fight over customers and territory, they united against external threats, particularly from law enforcement. "Thanks, Pearl," Lily says, pressing a coin into her hand. "We owe you one." "Just looking out for our own," Pearl replies with a shrug before disappearing back into the street. "Should we close for the night?" you ask, once she's gone. Lily shakes her head. "Can't. Not without Rosie's say-so. Besides, closing would just confirm something's up. Instead, you all begin discreet preparations, hiding savings and valuables, ensuring quick exit routes are clear, reviewing which customers might provide bail money if arrests occur. These practical responses to legal threats were well-rehearsed routines in brothel life. Mid-afternoon brings Madame Rosie back with Mary and Jenny, all three laden with packages. You quickly share Pearl's warning. "Humph," Madame Rosie snorts, seemingly unimpressed. "New marshal's just looking for his cut. Jim, take a bottle of the good whiskey over to his office. Tell him it's a welcome gift." This dance between brothels and law enforcement was as old as the profession itself. From outright bribes to more subtle gifts, maintaining workable relationships with legal authorities was essential to survival. "And if that doesn't work?" Sarah asks. "Then we have a backup plan," Madame Rosie says simply, not elaborating further. Her confidence is reassuring. She's weathered these storms before. As evening approaches, the brothel prepares to open for business as usual, though with heightened awareness. The piano player arrives, followed by the first customers, miners fresh off shift, trail dust still on their boots. "Just act natural," Madame Rosie instructs as she unlocks the front doors. "But keep an eye on the back exit." The early evening proceeds normally, though you notice Madame Rosie engaged in quiet conversations with several regular customers, men of some standing in the community. One, a silver-haired gentleman you recognize as a bank director, nods gravely before departing through the back door. "Insurance," Madame Rosie explains when she catches your questioning look. "Mr. Finch sits on the town council. He'd rather not see his favourite establishment closed." This reveals yet another layer of the social web, the unofficial alliances between brothels and powerful men whose public condemnation masked private patronage. Many a crusade against vice was quietly sabotaged by the very men who publicly supported it. The expected raid never materializes. Just before midnight, Jim returns from a scouting mission with news. "Marshall's been called to a disturbance at the mining office," he reports. "Something about claim jumpers, likely to keep him busy all night." The tension in the room eases, though no one explicitly acknowledges the fortunate timing of this disturbance. Some connections were best left unspoken. "Told you it would work out," Madame Rosie says with satisfaction. "Now back to business, ladies." The near miss brings a different energy to the brothel that night. The women move with lighter steps, laugh more readily. Shared crisis, even averted, strengthens bonds. You notice Sarah and Lily huddled in conversation with a miner you haven't seen before, their expressions serious despite the festive atmosphere. Later, when you ask about it, Sarah is evasive, just a friend from up north passing through. But that night, after closing, you discover the true purpose of the conversation when Sarah slips into the room you share with her and two others. "Lucy's leaving the Gem," she whispers, referring to the sick woman mentioned earlier. "That miner, he's her brother. Come to take her home to die. The Gem's letting her go? This surprises you. Many brothels effectively owned their workers through debt or contract." "No," Sarah says simply. "She's running tonight." The implication is clear. Sarah and Lily have been helping arrange an escape. This too was part of brothel life, the underground network that occasionally helped women leave the profession, especially those in dire circumstances. "Need anything from us?" you ask. Sarah hesitates. Then, "Keep watch at the window around 2. Signal if you see anyone coming." That night, while others sleep, you maintain a vigil at the window overlooking the back alley. Shortly before 2, figures move in the darkness. A man supporting a woman who seems barely able to walk. They pause at the back door of the Gem, then hurry toward a waiting wagon. No one pursues them. No alarm is raised. By morning, Lucy will be miles away, headed for a family home she probably never expected to see again. Whether she'll be welcomed or shunned there is unknown, but at least she won't die alone in a crib behind a saloon. This small act of mercy, this connection beyond business, exemplifies the deeper social reality of brothel life. These women, marginalized by mainstream society, created their own moral framework, their own community standards. They looked after their own when no one else would. Dawn finds you still at the window, watching as the town begins to stir. The baker's chimney starts smoking first, followed by the blacksmith's forge. A stray dog trots purposefully down the middle of the street. A pair of miners stumble home after a night shift or a prolonged drinking session. It's impossible to tell which. Sarah joins you, passing a cup of coffee. "They make it out okay?" You nod. "No problems I could see." She sips her coffee in silence, then, "I've been saving, got nearly enough for a ticket to San Francisco." This quiet confession, this sharing of a closely guarded dream, is a rare gift of trust. Every prostitute had an escape plan, real or imagined. Few ever implemented them successfully. "What would you do there?" you ask. "Open a dress shop, maybe." Sarah smiles faintly. "Or just be anonymous for a while, no one knowing what I was before." The dream of reinvention, of escaping not just the profession but the social stigma attached to it, was powerful. Some women did manage it, changed their names, moved to cities where no one knew them, built new lives. Others found that the past followed them regardless of distance. "You'd be good at it," you tell her. "The dress shop, I mean." "Maybe." She doesn't sound convinced, but appreciates the support. "One day, maybe." The moment is interrupted by sounds of the house waking up. Madame Rosie's heavy tread on the stairs, Jenny's laughter from the kitchen, the clatter of breakfast preparations. Another day in the life of the Silver Queen brothel is beginning. As you move to join the others, Sarah catches your arm briefly. "Thanks," she says simply, "for keeping watch." In that moment, you understand something essential about this world you've entered. Beyond the transactions and the performances, beyond the risks and hardships, there exists a genuine community. Women bound not just by circumstance, but by choice, protecting each other in a world that offers them little protection. You head downstairs together, stepping into the morning light that streams through the windows. The brothel looks different by day, shabbier, more vulnerable, but also more real. Like the women themselves, it has two faces, the gaudy evening mask and the plain morning truth. In the kitchen, Madame Rosie is already planning the day ahead. "Got a cattle buyer coming through," she announces. "Big spender, by all accounts. Jenny, you'll entertain him." The business continues, the social web expands and contracts, connections form and break. This is life in a Wild West brothel, not just a place of commerce, but a complex social ecosystem that both reflects and defies the larger society around it. Outside, the town of Virginia City is fully awake now. A church bell rings, calling the faithful to morning prayers. None of the women in the Silver Queen will attend, though their money helped build the steeple from which the bell hangs. Such is the paradox of their existence, essential to the community, yet excluded from it, hidden in plain sight. Better get some sleep, Madame Rosie tells you all. Going to be a busy night. You head back upstairs, passing the room where the hip bath still sits, water now cold and grey. Through the window you can see the distant mountains, purple in the morning light, seemingly untouched by human concerns. Sarah pauses beside you, following your gaze. "Pretty, isn't it?" she says softly. Easy to forget sometimes that there's a whole world out there beyond this place. In that quiet moment of shared appreciation, there's a glimpse of the people behind the personas, women with dreams and fears, connections and isolations, all navigating a precarious existence with whatever tools they can find. The social world of the Wild West brothel was neither as depraved as moralists claimed, nor as glamorous as fiction would later paint it. It was human, complex, contradictory, and surprisingly resilient. The connections forged there, both within and beyond its walls, created a tapestry of relationships that helped women survive in a world determined to both use and condemn them. As you finally seek your bed, the sounds of the waking town fade into the background. Sleep comes easier than you expected, cushioned perhaps by the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brings, you don't face it entirely alone. The afternoon sun slants through the windows of the Silver Queen, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. The house is quiet now, caught in that lull between morning preparations and evening business. In this moment of relative calm, a different side of brothel life reveals itself. The constant, often desperate battle to maintain health in an era when medicine was primitive and disease could mean not just suffering, but the end of a livelihood. The knock at the back door comes precisely at 3, as promised. Jim glances at Madame Rosie, who nods once. He opens the door to reveal a middle-aged man carrying a battered leather case, Dr. Simmons, making his discreet weekly visit to the Silver Queen. "Afternoon, ladies," he says, removing his hat as he steps inside. His voice is neither judgmental nor overly familiar, professional, with a hint of genuine concern. "Who's first today?" Unlike your modern doctor's office with its privacy and sterile equipment, medical examinations in a brothel were basic affairs conducted in whatever space was available. Today, it's the small back room normally used for storage and occasional card games. "Mary complained of symptoms," Madame Rosie says, gesturing toward the young woman who stands with arms crossed, face carefully blank. "Jenny's due for her regular check. Rest of you line up after." Regular medical examinations were a standard practice in better-run brothels, not out of legal requirement in most places, but as a business necessity. Disease could spread quickly through a house, decimating both the workforce and customer base. "Let's have a look then," Doc Simmons says, setting his bag on a table that Jim has hastily cleared. He pulls out a clean cloth, lays it down, and begins arranging his instruments. A far cry from modern medical tools, but the best available in the 1870s. Mary enters the makeshift examination room while the rest of you wait, making small talk that carefully avoids acknowledging what's happening behind the closed door. After about 15 minutes, she emerges, face still unreadable. "Jenny," she says simply, taking a seat at the far end of the room. One by one, you each take your turn with the doctor. The examinations are brief, uncomfortable, and rudimentary by modern standards. Doc Simmons checks for visible signs of venereal disease, listens to lungs and hearts with his stethoscope, and asks a few questions about symptoms. When your turn comes, the doctor's manner is matter of fact. Any issues to report? He asks, washing his hands in a basin of water that's been changed between patients, a relatively advanced hygiene practice for the time. Just the usual, you reply, tired, sore. He nods, unsurprised. The physical toll of prostitution was significant even without disease. Long hours standing or dancing disrupted sleep patterns and the simple wear and tear of the work itself. The examination proceeds quickly. When it's done, he gives you the same advice he gives everyone. Try to rest when you can, drink plenty of water, wash thoroughly after each customer. This last recommendation was one of the few effective preventative measures available against sexually transmitted infections. In an era before antibiotics, prevention was far more reliable than treatment. After the last examination, Doc Simmons confers quietly with Madame Rosie in the corner. You can't hear their words, but their expressions tell enough. Mary won't be working tonight. 2 weeks rest at minimum, the doctor says loudly enough for everyone to hear as he packs his bag. And the medicine 3 times daily. He hands Madame Rosie a small bottle of dark liquid. No one asks what's in the bottle. It could be anything from mercury compounds, the standard highly toxic treatment for syphilis, to herbal preparations or simple alcohol tinctures. Whatever it contains, it's unlikely to be truly effective against venereal disease. But it's all that's available. My bill, Doc Simmons says, handing Madame Rosie a folded piece of paper. She glances at it, nods, and counts out coins from the pouch at her waist. The amount is substantial. Medical care was expensive, especially the discreet kind provided to brothels. It's yet another cost of doing business that ate into the women's earnings. After the doctor leaves, the mood in the house shifts. Mary sits alone, staring at the bottle of medicine. How bad? Sarah asks gently, sitting beside her. Early stages, Mary replies, her voice flat. Says if I rest and take the medicine, I might be fine. Might. That single word carries the weight of uncertainty that haunted every prostitute's life. Venereal diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea were endemic in the profession. Early-stage syphilis might present as simple sores that healed on their own, giving false hope before the disease progressed to more serious, eventually fatal stages years later. You'll stay in my room, Madame Rosie decides. Sarah will cover your regulars. This arrangement, sick workers being cared for rather than simply dismissed, wasn't universal, but it was common in established houses. Madams understood that today's sick girl might be tomorrow's earner, and that showing care for ill workers encouraged loyalty from the healthy ones. What about my share of the rent? Mary asks. In most brothels, workers either split their earnings with the house or paid daily or weekly rent for their rooms. We'll work it out, Madame Rosie says with finality. Rest now, that's an order. As Mary is helped upstairs, Lily pulls a small wooden box from beneath a floorboard in the corner, another of the hiding places that dotted the house. Time for protection, she announces. The box contains an assortment of items that represented the limited methods available for preventing disease and pregnancy. Small squares of linen to be used as makeshift barriers, tins of various powders and ointments of dubious effectiveness, and dried herbs for making preventative teas. Got something new, Jenny says, pulling a small rubber object from her pocket. Travelling salesman had them. Cost me a day's earnings. It's a primitive version of a female condom, a technological advancement that would have been rare and expensive in this era. The women examine it with mixed expressions of hope and skepticism. Does it work? Sarah asks, turning the object in her hands. Jenny shrugs. Better than nothing, I figure. This casual exchange highlights a crucial reality of brothel life. Women shared information, resources, and protective methods in a communal effort to stay healthy. Long before formal sex education or healthcare access, this informal knowledge network was often their only defense against disease. I still say the vinegar wash is most reliable, Lily insists, referring to the practice of douching with vinegar solutions after intercourse, a method that provided some limited protection against both pregnancy and certain infections. Burns like hellfire, though, Sarah counters with a grimace. Better than what happened to Mary, Lily says simply. No one argues with this logic. The conversation turns to other protective measures, not just against disease, but against the various dangers that came with the profession. Mina tried to steal my earrings last night, Jenny says, touching the simple gold hoops she wears. Thought I was asleep after. Show them what you did, Madame Rosie encourages, a hint of pride in her voice. Jenny grins and pulls up her skirt a few inches to reveal a small knife strapped to her garter. Didn't have to use it, just showed it to him and he suddenly remembered his manners. Self-defense was a necessary skill for women in the sporting life. While madams like Rosie provided some protection, each woman ultimately had to look out for herself against violent or thieving customers. Good, Madame Rosie nods, but remember, pulling a knife is a last resort. Better to read a man before he gets dangerous. She moves to the bar and pours small glasses of whiskey, not the watered-down variety served to customers, but the real thing, kept for medicinal and ceremonial purposes. To staying healthy, she says, raising her glass in a toast that carries more weight than casual observers might recognize. You all drink, the whiskey burning a warm path to your stomachs. It's a rare moment of solidarity and shared purpose. Women united not just by circumstance, but by the common goal of survival in a hazardous profession. The peaceful moment is interrupted by Jim, returning from an errand in town with news. There's talk of a hygiene ordinance, he reports. Town council's considering it. Weekly doctor checks, mandatory. This news sends a ripple of concern through the room. While the Silver Queen already maintained voluntary medical examinations, government-mandated checks often came with registration requirements, fees, and potential legal complications. Who's pushing it? Madame Rosie asks sharply. New doctor in town, Jim replies. Young fellow with big ideas about public health. Got the minister's wife on his side. Madame Rosie's expression darkens. That woman lost 3 customers to her temperance meetings last month. The complex relationship between brothels and public health initiatives was rarely simple. While basic hygiene measures benefited everyone, regulations were often used as tools to control or eliminate prostitution rather than protect the women involved. What'll we do if it passes? Sarah asks. Same as always, Madame Rosie says with a shrug. Adapt. Pay the fees. Find the loopholes. This pragmatic approach to changing regulations was typical of successful madams who treated legal obstacles as business challenges rather than moral judgments. Speaking of adapting, Jim says, reaching into his coat, got something else you should see. He unfolds a newspaper named not the local Virginia City paper, but one from San Francisco, several weeks old. He points to a small article describing a new treatment for venereal diseases being tested in Europe. Mightn't help Mary now, he says, but worth knowing about. The women crowd around, reading with interest. Information about medical advances spread slowly to frontier communities, and those that did arrive were often mixed with snake oil claims and outright frauds. Still, they absorbed every piece of potentially useful knowledge. Says here they're using something called silver salts, Lily reads slowly, her finger tracing the words. Her literacy, like that of many prostitutes, is basic but functional, another survival skill in a world where contracts and business arrangements were increasingly written rather than verbal. I'll write to my cousin in San Francisco, Madame Rosie decides, see if she can find out more. This network of information exchange between brothels in different cities was yet another layer of the health protection system that prostitutes developed. Letters between madams often contained not just business news, but details about treatments, preventative measures, and warnings about dangerous remedies. As evening approaches, the house begins its transformation from daytime sanctuary to nighttime business. The piano player arrives, lamps are lit, and fresh sawdust is scattered on the floor to absorb spills and mask odours. Time to get ready, Madame Rosie announces. The preparation ritual includes not just cosmetics and clothing changes, but health precautions. Each woman tucks small cloths into accessible pockets for quick cleanups between customers. Jenny carefully straps her knife to her thigh. Sarah drinks a bitter-smelling tea made from the preventative herbs in Lily's box. Don't forget these, Madame Rosie says, distributing small vials of carbolic acid solution, a primitive antiseptic that served as a disinfectant wash. The smell is harsh, medicinal, nothing like the gentle soaps you're used to at home. Upstairs, Mary rests in Madame Rosie's room, her face pale against the pillows. You stop by briefly to check on her. Brought you some broth, you say, setting a cup on the bedside table. Thanks. Her voice is weak, her forehead damp with sweat. The early stages of treatment were often worse than the disease itself, as toxic mercury compounds worked their way through the body. Need anything else? She shakes her head slightly. Just don't tell the others how bad it is. Don't want them worrying. This concern for her fellow workers, even while suffering, illustrates the bonds that formed in these environments. Despite popular portrayals of prostitutes as strictly competitive, many houses developed strong internal support systems, women looking out for each other when no one else would. Rest, you tell her, touching her hand briefly. We've got things covered downstairs. The evening begins as customers start arriving, miners fresh from their shifts, businessmen claiming to be just passing by, cowboys with trail dust still on their boots, the usual mix of humanity seeking various forms of escape. You work the room with practiced ease, laughing at jokes you've heard 100 times, deflecting unwanted advances with gentle skill, steering potential customers toward transaction without explicit discussion, all while maintaining an almost subconscious vigilance for signs of trouble. A miner at the bar coughs repeatedly into his bandana, which comes away spotted with blood. You catch Sarah's eye across the room and make a subtle gesture. She nods, understanding the warning. Tuberculosis was as feared as venereal disease, perhaps more so for being easier to contract through casual contact. Sarah approaches the bar near the miner. Jim, she says loudly enough for the man to hear. Madame Rosie said we're not serving anyone who's sick tonight. Doctor's orders after what happened last month. The miner takes the hint, finishing his drink quickly before departing. No confrontation, no accusation, just a clear boundary established and respected. This delicate enforcement of health standards was part of survival in a profession where illness could spread rapidly through a house. As the night deepens, you find yourself in conversation with a well-dressed stranger, not a local, judging by his clothes and manner. He's polite, seemingly educated, and interested in more than just the obvious services. I'm a physician from Philadelphia, he explains after some general conversation, studying disease patterns in mining communities. You maintain your professional smile while mentally assessing the risk. He could be legitimate. Medical researchers did occasionally venture west, though rarely to brothels, or he could be lying to gain information or access. Fascinating work, you reply noncommittally. Must keep you busy. Indeed. I'm particularly interested in preventative measures employed in establishments like this one, he continues, leaning forward slightly. Purely academic interest, I assure you. You've heard variations of purely academic interest before, usually from men seeking details they found titillating rather than educational. Still, genuine medical knowledge was valuable enough to warrant careful consideration. You should speak with Madame Rosie about that, you suggest, nodding toward her impressive figure at the far end of the room. She handles all matters of house policy. The deflection is smooth, practiced, neither rejection nor acceptance, simply transferring the decision to higher authority. It's one of countless small protective strategies developed through experience. The doctor does approach Madame Rosie later in the evening. Their conversation lasts nearly an hour, heads bent together in the corner. When he finally leaves, she gathers the women briefly during a lull in business. That man had some useful information, she tells you all. New treatments being tested back east. I've written it all down for Doc Simmons to review. This exchange of medical knowledge, flowing from formal institutions to the informal networks of brothel workers, was an unrecognized but vital channel for health information in the developing West. Women in the sporting life were often more knowledgeable about certain aspects of sexual health than many formally trained physicians, having learned through hard-won experience. The night wears on. You serve drinks, entertain customers, occasionally disappear upstairs for brief business-like encounters that bear little resemblance to the passionate romances depicted in fictional accounts of brothel life. Between customers, you perform small protective rituals, washing quickly with the carbolic solution, checking for any signs of trouble, taking small sips of the preventative tea that tastes of herbs and bitter determination. In the quietest hour before dawn, when only a few dedicated drinkers remain at the bar, you find yourself sitting with Sarah and Lily in a corner, feet aching, counting the night's earnings. Not bad, Lily says, stacking coins into neat piles. Enough to put a little aside. For what? Asks Sarah. Your dress shop or mine? It's a running joke between them, these dreams of escape that seem simultaneously within reach and impossibly distant. For medicine, more likely, Lily says, her usual humour faltering as she glances toward the stairs where Mary rests. Never know when you'll need it. The comment hangs in the air, a stark reminder of the health realities that shaped every aspect of brothel life. Dreams might sustain the spirit, but practical considerations, medicine, doctor's fees, savings for periods of illness, governed daily decisions. To staying healthy, Sarah says, raising her glass in an echo of Madame Rosie's earlier toast. To staying healthy, you and Lily repeat. In that moment, the clink of your glasses carries the weight of shared understanding that in this life, health wasn't just about physical well-being, but about economic survival, about maintaining the precarious independence that brought many women to this profession in the first place. Outside, the eastern sky begins to lighten. Another night has passed at the Silver Queen. The women have laughed and lied, protected themselves and each other, navigated the dangers both visible and microscopic that threatened their livelihood and lives. As the last customer is ushered out and the doors locked for the day, there's a collective exhale. Another night survived, another day to rest and recover before it all begins again. You head upstairs, pausing to check on Mary once more. She's sleeping now, her breathing steadier. Whether from genuine improvement or simply exhaustion is impossible to tell. In your shared room, Sarah is already undressing, her movements mechanical with fatigue. "Think I'll use some of that carbolic solution again before bed," she murmurs. Extra precaution. Good idea, you agree, reaching for your own vial. This final cleansing ritual before sleep, another layer of protection, another small act of self-preservation, underscores the constant vigilance required in a profession where health risks were omnipresent and effective treatments scarce. As you finally sink into bed, your body aching with the night's exertions, you find yourself contemplating the complex health ecosystem of the Wild West brothel, not just the disease and dangers, but the ingenious protective measures, the information networks, the communal care systems that developed in response. These women, excluded from respectable society and its resources, created their own healthcare systems out of necessity and shared wisdom. They adapted, innovated, and protected themselves and each other as best they could with limited tools and knowledge. Sleep comes quickly, dreamless, and deep. Your last conscious thought is a simple gratitude for the clean bedding beneath you, the roof above, and the knowledge that for tonight at least you remain among the healthy and working. Unlike Mary, whose future hangs in a precarious balance between recovery and decline, unlike countless others whose names history has forgotten, women who faced the same health challenges without the relative security of an established house like the Silver Queen. Tomorrow will bring its own concerns, more customers, more risks, more protective measures. But for now, in the quiet morning hours, there is only rest and the momentary peace it brings. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows through the windows of the Silver Queen, illuminating dust motes that dance in the golden light. It's the quiet hour, that liminal space between day and evening when the brothel transitions from private sanctuary to public business. In this moment of calm, Madame Rosie sits at a small desk in the corner of the saloon, ledger open before her, spectacles perched on her nose as she carefully tallies figures. This scene, rarely depicted in romanticized portrayals of Wild West brothels, reveals one of the most significant aspects of the sporting life, its fundamental nature as a business enterprise, with all the economic complexities that entailed. "Girls," Madame Rosie calls, her voice carrying up the stairs. "Accounting time." The women descend one by one, some still drowsy from daytime sleep, others freshly washed in preparation for the evening ahead. They gather around the desk with an air of expectancy that has nothing to do with the performances they'll put on for customers later. This is genuine interest. Their livelihoods are recorded in that leather-bound book. "Good week overall," Madame Rosie announces, turning the ledger so everyone can see the neat columns of figures. Up 15% from last month. Unlike the stereotypical image of the madam keeping her girls in ignorance and debt, many successful brothel operators like Rosie ran relatively transparent financial systems. The women knew what they earned, what they owed, and what they could expect to keep. "Sarah, you're up by nearly $20, Madame Rosie notes with approval. "That cattle broker must have really taken a shine to you." Sarah allows herself a small smile of professional pride. In the complex economy of a brothel, regular clients who developed preferences for specific women were valuable assets, reliable income in an otherwise unpredictable business. "Monthly expenses," Madame Rosie continues, flipping to another page. "Rent to Mr. Holcomb, $5 a week, so $20 for the month. Liquor bill from Thompson's, $42 and change. Wood and coal, $15. Water delivery, $8. Piano player's wages, $12. These mundane operational costs were the foundation of brothel economics, the fixed expenses that had to be covered before anyone made a profit. They were substantial, especially in remote mining towns where goods and services commanded premium prices. "Dr. Simmons, $25 for the month," she adds, "plus extra for Mary's treatment." Healthcare was another significant expense in the brothel economy, both preventative examinations and treatments for the various ailments that plagued workers in the profession. Unlike modern businesses with health insurance, these costs came directly from the house's earnings or the women's personal savings. Protection money, Lily asks bluntly, referring to the unofficial payments made to law enforcement to avoid harassment or arrest. 15 to Marshal Davis, Madame Rosie confirms, and another 10 to Deputy Wilson. This aspect of brothel finances was universal across the West, regular payments to authorities who publicly condemned vice while privately profiting from it. In some towns, these payments were formalized as fines that amounted to business licenses. In others, they remained under-the-table arrangements. What about the new marshal? Sarah asks, referring to the threat discussed earlier. Being handled, Madame Rosie says with finality. Mr. Finch at the bank is seeing to it. The economics of a Wild West brothel extended beyond its walls into a web of community relationships. Powerful men who publicly maintained respectable facades while privately patronizing establishments like the Silver Queen often served as unofficial protectors, using their influence to shield their preferred houses from legal troubles. Now for your shares, Madame Rosie says, turning to another page. The division of earnings varied widely between establishments. In some houses, women were essentially employees receiving a percentage of their earnings. In others, they were more like independent contractors paying rent for their rooms and keeping the rest. Same arrangement as always, she explains for your benefit as the newest addition to the house. House takes 40%, you keep 60%. Out of your share comes board, laundry and personal expenses. What's left is yours to save or spend as you please. This split was actually favourable compared to many brothels, where workers might keep as little as 50% or even less of their earnings. Madame Rosie's relatively fair terms explained the loyalty of her girls and the house's reputation for quality. Jenny, $128 this month, so your share is 76 and change. Madame Rosie counts out bills and coins, pushing them across the desk. Board is 15, laundry 3. That leaves you $58 clear. Jenny receives her earnings with practiced nonchalance, but you notice how carefully she counts the money before tucking it away. $58 was a substantial sum in the 1870s, more than many skilled labourers earned in a month. The financial reality of prostitution was that despite its dangers and social costs, it often paid better than any other work available to women. What about Mary's share? Sarah asks, glancing toward the stairs where Mary still rests, recovering from her illness. Half pay during recovery, Madame Rosie states. House rules. This policy, continuing to provide some income during periods of illness or injury. One by one, each woman receives her earnings. When your turn comes, you accept the small stack of bills and coins with a mixture of pride and resignation. The money represents both freedom and its cost, the ability to support yourself independently, and the price paid for that independence. Don't forget to put something aside, Madame Rosie advises as she closes the ledger. Never know when you'll need a nest egg. This common refrain in brothel life reflected a harsh reality. The career of a soiled dove was typically short, ended by disease, violence, addiction, or simply aging out of customer preference. Smart workers saved aggressively, hoping to accumulate enough to escape the profession before it claimed them. Speaking of saving, Jim interjects, approaching the desk with an envelope. Land office notice came today. Madame Rosie takes the envelope, her expression betraying unusual excitement as she reads its contents. It's done, she announces. Deeds registered. The plot on C Street is officially mine. This revelation highlights another economic aspect of brothel life often overlooked in historical accounts: property investment. Successful madams frequently channeled their earnings into real estate, using these tangible assets to secure their futures when their working days ended. Going to build that new place after all? Lily asks. Come spring, Madame Rosie confirms. 2 stories, 10 rooms, proper plumbing. The women exchange glances, clearly visualizing this step up from their current accommodations. Indoor plumbing was a luxury in 1870s mining towns, available only in the newest and most expensive buildings. You'll all have a place there, Madame Rosie assures them, assuming you stay out of trouble and keep bringing in the business. This planned expansion represents the business acumen that characterized many successful madams. They weren't simply managers of vice, but entrepreneurs who reinvested profits, expanded operations, and built legitimate business empires that sometimes extended far beyond the sex trade. As if on cue, the front door opens to admit a well-dressed woman who looks decidedly out of place in a brothel. The women tense instinctively. Respectable ladies rarely entered establishments like the Silver Queen, and when they did, it usually meant trouble. Mrs. Peterson, Madame Rosie greets the visitor with cautious formality. What brings you to my establishment? The visitor, perhaps 40 years old and wearing an expensive dress that marks her as a member of Virginia City's elite, appears uncomfortable but determined. Business, Miss Rosie, she replies stiffly. Regarding the millinery shop? This cryptic exchange piques everyone's interest. Madame Rosie gestures toward her private office at the back of the building. Let's discuss it in private. After they disappear behind the closed door, speculation erupts among the women. Millinery shop? Jenny asks, confused. Rosie owns it, Lily explains in a low voice, or at least half of it. Set it up for a girl who left the life a few years back. This revelation adds another layer to the economic picture. Diversification into legitimate businesses? Many madams use their brothel earnings to establish or invest in conventional enterprises, both as additional income streams and as vehicles for eventual transition out of the sex trade. Smart, Sarah comments. Hat shop's respectable. Nobody questions a woman running it. The economic options for women in the 1870s West were severely limited. Teaching, nursing, and domestic service were among the few respectable occupations, all paying far less than prostitution. Retail businesses like millinery shops represented a middle ground, respectable but accessible to women with the capital to establish them. When Madame Rosie emerges from her office 30 minutes later, her expression gives nothing away. Mrs. Peterson departs quickly, nodding stiffly to the women as she passes. Investment opportunity, Madame Rosie explains briefly. Nothing for you girls to worry about. The dismissal is clear. Some business matters remain the madam's private concern. This hierarchical structure, with the madam controlling overall finances while allowing workers certain economic freedoms, defined most brothel operations. As evening approaches, the Silver Queen begins its transformation from private dwelling to public business. The piano player arrives, lamps are lit, and glasses are arranged behind the bar in neat rows. Nearly time, Madame Rosie announces. Get yourselves ready. The preparation rituals include not just physical readiness but financial considerations. Each woman secures her accumulated savings in various hiding places, some under floorboards, others in hollowed-out books, or secret compartments in trunks. Trust in banks was limited in an era of frequent financial panics, and women in the sporting life often preferred keeping their money where they could see it. Got something for you, Sarah says quietly, slipping you a small cloth pouch. For your savings. Inside is a tin container, the kind that once held hard candies, now repurposed as a secure money box. It's small enough to hide easily, but large enough to hold a considerable sum when filled. Had it made special, she explains. False bottom, Hide the big bills underneath. Keep small change on top. If anyone finds it, they'll take the visible money and might not check further. This pragmatic approach to financial security, assuming theft attempts rather than hoping to prevent them entirely, was typical of women who learned through experience that trust was a luxury they couldn't always afford. Thank you, you say, recognizing the gift as both practical assistance and a gesture of acceptance. Been where you are, Sarah replies simply. First months are hardest, gets easier. The economic journey of a brothel worker typically followed a pattern: initial months of establishing regular customers and learning the business, followed by a period of peak earnings, eventually declining as youth faded or health issues emerged. The smartest women maximized their earnings during their prime years, saving aggressively for inevitable decline. The first customers of the evening begin arriving as dusk falls. Miners from the day shift, their faces still bearing traces of silver dust despite attempts to clean up. They order whiskey at the bar, eyeing the women with varying degrees of subtlety. Remember, Madame Rosie murmurs as she passes, quality over quantity. One good customer pays better than 3 cheap ones. This business strategy distinguished better houses like the Silver Queen from the cribs at the edges of town, where volume of customers took precedence over quality of experience. Madame Rosie cultivated a clientele willing to pay premium prices, allowing her women to work less while earning more. The evening progresses with the familiar rhythm of the trade. You move through the room with practiced ease, engaging in conversation designed to encourage drink purchases and eventual negotiation for more intimate services. A well-dressed stranger catches your eye. Clearly not a miner or cowboy, but perhaps a businessman passing through. These transient customers, often from larger cities with more disposable income, were particularly valued in the brothel economy. "Buy you a drink?" he offers when you approach. "Love one," you reply with the practiced smile that's become second nature. The business transaction that follows is conducted in the coded language of the profession, nothing so crass as direct negotiation of services and prices, but a mutual understanding reached through euphemism and suggestion. "Might you be available for a private conversation upstairs?" he eventually asks, the standard formula in establishments like the Silver Queen. "I believe I could make time," you respond in kind, "for the right company." The price is communicated with similar indirection, references to proper appreciation and generous nature, establishing expectations without explicit discussion. This social dance, with its pretense of spontaneous attraction rather than commercial exchange, was part of the experience customers paid for. Once agreement is reached, payment is handled discreetly. Unlike modern transactions with credit cards and receipts, brothel economics operated on cash, often paid in advance to prevent disputes afterward. The business aspect of the encounter itself is efficiently managed, services rendered according to unspoken agreement, time kept within established limits, additional requests subject to additional charges. The emotional labor of feigning interest and enthusiasm is as much part of the transaction as physical acts. Afterward, you follow the house procedure for accounting, a portion of the earnings immediately set aside for Madame Rosie to be formally recorded in the ledger tomorrow. The remainder you secure in Sarah's gift, the tin box hidden beneath a loose floorboard under your bed. The night continues in this pattern, business transactions disguised as social interactions, each with its own negotiation, performance and settlement. By the time the last customer departs near dawn, the economic machinery of the brothel has processed hundreds of dollars through dozens of individual exchanges. "Good night," Madame Rosie pronounces as Jim locks the door behind the final departing client. "Everybody paid their share?" Each woman confirms her accounting, the day's earnings now distributed between housecut and personal holdings. This daily settlement prevented disputes and ensured the house maintained its operating capital. "That businessman from Sacramento," Lily remarks as you all gather for a brief unwinding before sleep. "He left his card, says he'll be back next month." This information is noted with approval. Regular visitors, even infrequent ones, represented reliable income in an unpredictable business. Their preferences would be remembered, their return anticipated. "Mary's looking better," Sarah reports, having checked on the sick woman earlier. "Doctor says she might be back on her feet in a week." This good news has economic implications beyond simple concern for a colleague. Mary's recovery means return to full staffing, more comprehensive service offerings, and greater overall house earnings. "What about that new place on D Street?" Jenny asks as conversation flows. "Heard they're charging less than we do." "And offering less," Madame Rosie responds firmly. "Quality has its price. We're not competing with cribs." This market positioning, premium service at premium prices, was a deliberate business strategy. The Silver Queen catered to customers who could afford to pay for better surroundings, healthier women, and more sophisticated entertainment than found in cheaper establishments. "I'm saving for a sewing machine," Jenny says suddenly, changing the subject. "Singer makes one for $20. Figure I could make some extra taking in mending during slow times." This entrepreneurial thinking, developing secondary income streams, was common among forward-thinking brothel workers. Many supplemented their earnings with side businesses ranging from dressmaking to fortune-telling, building skills that might eventually provide an exit from the sporting life. "Smart girl," Madame Rosie approves. "Always good to have options." As the conversation winds down and exhaustion takes its toll, the women drift upstairs to their beds. Economic concerns follow them even into sleep. Dreams of savings accumulated, investments made, futures secured through strategic financial planning. In your shared room, Sarah counts her night's earnings one final time before hiding them away. The ritual is methodical, practiced, bills smoothed and arranged by denomination, coins stacked in neat piles. $18, she murmurs, satisfaction evident in her voice. "Another month like this, and I'll have enough." "For the dress shop?" you ask, remembering her mentioned dream. "Maybe," she replies, suddenly hesitant. "Or maybe just a ticket east. Sometimes I think about going home." This ambivalence about financial goals was common. Some women saved for specific business ventures, others for simple escape, still others with only vague notions of enough to leave the life behind. What united them was the underlying recognition that money represented the only reliable path out of prostitution. "How much is enough?" you ask, genuinely curious. Sarah considers this seriously. 500 would do it. Enough for a ticket, decent clothes, and a little to get established somewhere new, where nobody knows what I was. $500. A substantial sum in the 1870s, equivalent to perhaps a year's wages for a skilled male worker. For a successful brothel worker, it represented several months of aggressive saving, attainable but requiring discipline and luck. "You'll get there," you assure her. "Hope so," she replies, stifling a yawn as she settles into bed. "Better than ending up like Sal." Sal, woman who worked here before you, spent everything she made. When she got too old for this place, ended up in the cribs down by the mines. Last I heard, she was drinking herself to death on whatever she could earn from the poorest miners. This cautionary tale, the fate of those who failed to plan for inevitable decline, was part of brothel folklore, a grim reminder of the economic precipice on which all sex workers stood. Outside, the mining town is coming fully awake as you prepare for sleep. The stamp mills that crush ore run continuously, their rhythmic pounding a constant backdrop to life in Virginia City. That sound represents the economic engine that drives the entire community, the extraction of silver that brings men, money, and the demand for services, including those offered at the Silver Queen. As you drift towards sleep, your mind catalogues the complex economic web revealed in just one day at the brothel, the formal accounting with its precise divisions of income and expense, the investment strategies of a madam building her business empire, the individual financial goals of women trying to secure futures beyond the sporting life, the daily negotiations that translate desire into dollars, the community connections that link the brothel economy to the wider commercial world. The Wild West brothel was many things, a social institution, a health hazard, a moral flashpoint, but it was always, fundamentally, a business. The women who worked in these establishments were entrepreneurs operating within severe constraints, using the limited options available to them to maximize earnings, minimize risks, and, when possible, build pathways to different futures. Sleep comes easily after the long night's work, your body settling into the lumpy mattress that represents both your current reality and the stepping stone to whatever comes next. Your last conscious thought is a simple calculation. How many nights like this one would it take to save your own $500? How long until you too might have options beyond these walls? The answer follows you into dreams not of romance or adventure, but of ledger books, carefully counted coins, and the distant promise of economic freedom. The afternoon sunlight filters through lace curtains that have seen better days, casting dappled patterns across the worn floorboards of the Silver Queen. It's been 3 months since you first walked through these doors, 3 months of learning the rhythms and rules of brothel life. Now, as you sit by the window, darning a torn stocking, you find yourself contemplating not just your daily routine, but the longer arc of life in the sporting trade and the various ways women found their way out of it. "Letter for you, Sarah," Jim announces, appearing at the doorway with a single envelope. Sarah takes it with carefully controlled eagerness, her fingers tracing the return address before she tucks it away unopened. "Thanks," she says simply, but the single word carries weight. "Good news?" you ask, once Jim has gone. "Hope so," she replies. "It's from my cousin in San Francisco. She's the one helping me look for a place to rent, for the dress shop." Sarah's planned exit from brothel life, saving to establish a legitimate business, represents one of the more successful paths women followed. Unlike factory work or domestic service, which paid barely subsistence wages, skilled trades like dressmaking offered both respectability and potential prosperity. "Got the last $50 last night," she adds, her voice low though there's no one else in the room. $520 total, enough to make the move, rent a small place, buy supplies. This milestone, reaching a savings goal that makes escape possible, was one many brothel workers aspired to, but relatively few achieved. Between house fees, living expenses, costs of required finery, and the ever-present temptations of alcohol and laudanum, saving substantial sums required uncommon discipline. "When will you go?" you ask, realizing with a pang that you'll miss her steady presence. "End of the month if the letter says she's found a suitable place." Sarah's expression is complicated, hope mingled with uncertainty. Madame Rosie already knows, said she'd have a goodbye party. This too was part of brothel tradition, acknowledging departures that ended on good terms with celebration rather than recrimination. Madams like Rosie, who took a longer view of their business, understood that maintaining positive relationships with former employees created a network of contacts and referrals that benefited everyone. "What about you?" Sarah asks. "Still planning to stay the year?" You nod, having settled on this time frame as your own goal. A year to learn the business, establish regular customers, and save enough to consider other options. 3 months down, 9 to go. Smart, she approves. First year's the hardest. Gets easier once you know who's who and have regulars who ask for you. The conversation is interrupted by sounds from upstairs. Mary, fully recovered from her illness, laughing at something Jenny has said. Her return to health represents another facet of brothel life, the resilience that allowed women to bounce back from setbacks that might have destroyed them in other circumstances. "Remember that woman who came through last week?" Sarah asks, changing the subject. "The one selling fabric samples?" You nod, recalling the middle-aged woman who had stopped at the Silver Queen, ostensibly as a travelling saleswoman, but clearly comfortable in surroundings that would have scandalised most respectable ladies. "Used to work for Madame Rosie 10 years ago," Sarah reveals. "Now she's got her own business, travels all over the West. Even has a Chinese man who works for her, carries her trunks and samples." This revelation highlights another potential legacy of brothel life, the business skills and confidence gained through years in a demanding profession. Women who succeeded in navigating the complex social and economic terrain of prostitution often developed capabilities that transferred surprisingly well to legitimate enterprise. "Rosie's got at least 4 former girls who've gone straight," Sarah continues, keeps track of them, helps them get started. That millinery shop she invested in, run by a woman who worked here 5 years before opening it. This network of former prostitutes establishing themselves in conventional businesses created a hidden economic pipeline, channeling money and opportunities among women who shared a common past but sought different futures. The front door opens, admitting Madame Rosie herself, returning from errands in town. Her expression is thunderous as she stamps snow from her boots. Winter has come early to Virginia City, adding another layer of challenge to daily life. "Everything all right?" you ask as she enters the sitting room. "That damned temperance society," she fumes, removing her heavy coat. "They're pushing a petition to close all establishments on D&E streets. The Silver Queen stands on E Street, squarely in the target zone. This cycle of moral crusades, led typically by the wives of the same men who frequented brothels, was a constant in Western communities. Periods of tolerance alternated with crackdowns, usually depending on the economic conditions and political climate of the moment. "They'll never get it through," Sarah says with confidence born of experience. "Too many businesses depend on us, and half the town council are customers." "Maybe," Madame Rosie concedes, her anger fading to resignation. "But it's a reminder not to get too comfortable. This business has always been about adapting or dying." This perspective, seeing prostitution as a constantly evolving enterprise rather than a fixed institution, characterized the most successful madams. They anticipated social changes, diversified their investments, and prepared contingency plans for the inevitable periods of persecution. "Which reminds me," she continues, her mood lightening slightly. "Got news about Josephine." The name clearly means something to Sarah, who perks up with interest. "She finally did it? Moved to St. Louis?" "Better," Madame Rosie says with evident satisfaction. "Married that cattle broker who'd been sweet on her for years. He bought her a house in Denver, right on Quality Hill, respectable as can be." Marriage represented another exit path from brothel life, though a rare one. While many customers might develop attachments to particular women, few were willing to overcome the social stigma attached to marrying a former prostitute. Those who did were often men with their own unconventional backgrounds or limited social standing to lose. "Never thought she'd get out that way," Sarah muses. "Always figured she'd buy that restaurant she talked about." Life surprises you sometimes, Madame Rosie says, settling into her favourite chair by the stove. That's why I always tell you girls to keep your options open. As if on cue, Mary appears on the stairs, a newspaper in hand. Look at this, she says, spreading it open to reveal an advertisement circled in pencil. Lady Barber wanted in Carson City says they'll train suitable applicants. This novel opportunity, women's barbering, being a relatively new and somewhat controversial occupation, generates immediate discussion. The women gather around, examining the advertisement with the keen interest of those always alert for potential escape routes. Pays not great to start, Lily observes critically. But it says room and board included during training. And you'd be working with respectable folks, Jenny adds, not having to pretend you're something you're not. This aspect, the psychological toll of living a double life, was a significant factor driving women to seek exits from prostitution even when the financial rewards remained superior to most alternatives. The constant pretense, the social rejection, the necessity of creating and maintaining false identities, all wore heavily over time. I might write to them, Mary decides, folding the paper carefully. After I've saved a bit more, always did have a steady hand. These moments of contemplating alternative futures were common in the quieter hours of brothel life. While popular imagination painted prostitutes as either fallen women beyond redemption or victims awaiting rescue, the reality was far more nuanced. Women actively planning and working towards self-directed transitions when circumstances permitted. As evening approaches, the daily transformation of the Silver Queen begins. Lamps are lit, the piano tuned, glasses arranged behind the bar in neat rows. The women retire upstairs to prepare for the night ahead, changing into the more elaborate costumes expected by customers. In the room you share with Sarah, she finally opens her letter, reading it silently before looking up with an expression of controlled excitement. She found a place, she says simply. Small, but on a decent street. Previous tenant was a seamstress too, so it's already set up for the work. That's wonderful, you reply, genuinely happy for her while feeling the impending loss of her companionship. I'll write back tomorrow to confirm, she continues, tucking the letter away carefully. Then give Madame Rosie my notice. 2 weeks should be enough time to find a replacement. The brothel economy adapted quickly to departures, with new women constantly entering the profession as others left it. The faces changed, but the institution remained, fulfilling its economic and social function in communities where men vastly outnumbered women. You'll be missed, you say? You tell her, helping her with the buttons of her evening dress, a deep blue satin that complements her fair complexion. You'll be fine, she assures you, and who knows, maybe in a year you can come to San Francisco too. I'll need help in the shop eventually. This suggestion, maintaining connections beyond brothel life, highlights another legacy of the profession. Women who shared the experience of prostitution often formed lasting bonds, creating informal support networks that extended long after their working relationships ended. Maybe I will, you agree, the possibility both appealing and seemingly distant. The evening progresses with familiar routine, drinks served, conversations maintained, business transacted with the practiced efficiency that comes from repetition. But tonight you observe everything with new awareness, seeing not just the immediate exchanges but the longer trajectories they represent. Near midnight, an unusual visitor arrives, an elderly woman, elegantly dressed but clearly uncomfortable in the brothel setting. She asks specifically for Madame Rosie, who receives her with evident surprise. Mrs. Langford, she greets the visitor. This is unexpected. The old woman gets straight to business. "I've come about my grandson," she says stiffly. "I have reason to believe he's been spending his inheritance here." Rather than defensiveness or denial, Madame Rosie responds with professional courtesy. "Let's discuss this privately," she suggests, leading the woman to her office at the back of the building. When they emerge half an hour later, the atmosphere between them has changed subtly. Not friendship exactly, but a kind of grudging mutual respect. "Thank you for your discretion in this matter," Mrs. Langford says formally as she prepares to leave. "Of course," Madame Rosie replies. "Family concerns are always delicate." After the visitor departs, Madame Rosie explains the situation to the curious women. Her grandson's been spending too freely here. She's worried he'll go through his father's legacy before he's properly established in business. "We've come to an arrangement. He'll still be welcome, but with limits on his credit." This negotiation between the formal and informal economies, between socially opposed but practically connected women, exemplifies the complex role brothels played in Western communities. They existed both outside respectable society and intimately connected to it, serving as sites where otherwise rigid social boundaries became temporarily permeable. "Never thought I'd see old Lady Langford in a place like this," Lily marvels. Her husband was a church deacon. "Everyone has their breaking point," Madame Rosie observes sagely. "Hers was watching family money flow into my pockets instead of her own. The night deepens, customers come and go, business continues, yet beneath the seemingly unchanging routines, currents of transition are clearly visible. Sarah planning her departure, Mary considering a new profession, Madame Rosie negotiating the shifting social terrain that threatens and sustains her business in equal measure. After the last customer has gone and the doors are locked for the night, the women gather briefly in the kitchen for a late meal. These informal gatherings, away from customer eyes, were where the real community of the brothel revealed itself, women supporting each other through the challenges of a difficult profession. "To Sarah," Lily proposes, raising a glass, "may your needles be sharp and your customers pay promptly." "To Sarah," everyone echoes, celebrating her impending escape while acknowledging their own continued residence in the life she's leaving. "I'll write," Sarah promises. "Let you know how things go, and we'll visit when we can," Jenny adds. "If we're ever in San Francisco." These connections, maintained across geographical distance and social boundaries, formed another legacy of brothel life. Women who shared this experience often remained linked throughout their lives, providing mutual aid and understanding that those outside the profession couldn't offer. As the gathering breaks up and everyone heads to bed, exhausted from the night's work, you find yourself contemplating the various paths women took out of prostitution, some successful, others tragic, many falling somewhere in between. There was the business route, like Sarah's planned dress shop or Madame Rosie's real estate investments. There was marriage, rare but occasionally genuine. There was family reconciliation, with women returning to homes they'd left under various circumstances. There was geographical escape, moving to places where one's past remained unknown, starting fresh with carefully constructed identities. And there were the less fortunate outcomes, the descent from higher class establishments to cribs and street walking as youth faded, the slow decline through alcohol and opium addiction, the early deaths from disease, violence or suicide that claimed so many in the profession. In your shared room, Sarah packs a small valise with personal items, not for immediate departure, but in preparation for it. The sight is both encouraging and unsettling, a reminder that transitions out of brothel life were both possible and precarious. "Nervous?" you ask, watching her carefully fold a daguerreotype of her family into a handkerchief. Terrified, she admits with surprising candor. Been 7 years since I lived any other way. Sometimes I wonder if I even remember how normal people act. This concern, the fear of being permanently marked by prostitution, unable to reintegrate into conventional society, haunted many women contemplating exit. The psychological legacy of the sporting life often proved more difficult to escape than its physical circumstances. You'll be fine, you assure her, echoing her earlier encouragement to you. You've always been the sensible one, and you've got real skills. Hope so, she says, closing the valise and sliding it under her bed. Guess I'll find out soon enough. Outside, snow falls gently on Virginia City, muffling the sounds of the mining operations that run day and night. The winter landscape transforms the rough-edged town into something almost beautiful, covering its scars and blemishes with pristine white. Ever wonder what people will remember about places like this? Sarah asks suddenly, gesturing vaguely to encompass the brothel. 100 years from now, I mean. It's an unexpected philosophical turn, but not inappropriate for this moment of transition. I don't know, you answer honestly. Maybe nothing. Maybe they'll forget we were ever here. Or maybe they'll make up stories, she suggests. Turn us all into saints or sinners, nothing in between. This intuition that history would struggle to capture the complex reality of women in the sporting life proved remarkably accurate. The legacy of Wild West prostitution would indeed be contested territory, with narratives ranging from romantic glorification to moral condemnation, rarely capturing the pragmatic middle ground where most brothel workers actually lived. We were just people, Sarah says softly, already speaking of herself in the past tense as she prepares to leave this identity behind. Just women trying to get by, same as anyone. This simple truth, the essential humanity of women whom history would often reduce to stereotypes, stands as perhaps the most important legacy of brothel life. Behind the labels of soiled doves or fallen women were individuals making difficult choices in challenging circumstances, crafting lives of meaning and purpose despite significant constraints. As you finally settle into bed, physically exhausted but mentally alert, you find yourself taking inventory of the brothel's legacies, both societal and personal. The economic contributions that built schools, churches, and businesses, the social networks that supported women within and beyond the profession, the skills and resilience developed through navigation of a dangerous occupation, the hidden influence on everything from fashion to language to social mores. And on a more intimate level, the individual legacies of women like Sarah preparing to carry her brothel-earned capital and skills into a new life. Like Mary, considering a transition to a novel occupation that didn't exist a generation earlier. Like Madame Rosie, building a business empire that would outlast her years in the sporting life. Sleep begins to claim you at last, your thoughts growing hazy as your body surrenders to well-earned rest. Through the window you can see snow still falling, each flake unique and ephemeral, much like the countless women who passed through brothels across the West, briefly visible before disappearing into the greater landscape of history. Their stories, like yours, were neither as romantic as fiction would later paint them, nor as sordid as moralists claimed. They were human stories, complex, contradictory, and ultimately familiar in their basic aspirations for security, connection, and purpose. As consciousness fades, your awareness of the hard mattress beneath you and the cold air on your face merges with appreciation for your own warm, comfortable bed at home. The contrast between then and now, between the harsh realities of Wild West brothel life and the security of your contemporary existence, brings a wave of gratitude. Those women of the sporting life, with their pragmatic approach to survival, their community building in adverse circumstances, their economic ingenuity when most paths were closed to them, left legacies both acknowledged and hidden in the society that emerged from the American frontier.